Prologue. I raced up the last flight of stone stairs to the top of the Dark Lord's castle's tallest tower. My chest was heaving, and my legs and feet were scorching from the incredibly long climb. This was it. This was finally it. After all these years, I was finally going to destroy the most powerful and evil wizard in the history of Alandra, the man who killed Father right after I was born 18 years ago, and the man who had been ruling Alandra with his twisted army of Shadriths ever since. Just thinking about those horrible, hulking, all-black creatures made my spine stiffen as straight as this tower as I climbed the last few steps. All the nasty brutes must go, along with Lord Sycorath himself, of course. Thankfully, I'd already demolished quite a few Shadriths without a problem, but once I defeated Lord Sycorath himself, the rest of them, along with his long, horrendous reign, would finally disappear forever as well. I froze at the top of the steps. There he stood in the middle of the roof, his back to me, black cloak billowing in the light breeze. I tried to swallow, but my throat was as dry as the Azrael desert. Come on, Mara. You can defeat him. You're powerful enough.
Mara.
He projected his grave, deep voice directly in my mind.
I knew you'd be here. I knew this day would come at last.
Me too, I said, struggling not to stutter. It wasn't really working out all too well. And it is on this fateful day that you will finally pay for everything you've done, Lord Sycorath.
Oh, is that right?
I knotted my fists tightly at my sides. Yes, that's right.
Well, we'll just have to see about that, little stuttering child.
He slowly turned around, his hood hiding his face, and I tried as hard as I could not to shudder. There was something so creepy about not being able to see what he actually looked like. Mother told me he had all black eyes, bone-white flesh, and sunken features that made it seem as though he'd been rotting in the earth for centuries. It was actually kind of odd when you thought about it. If you were one of the most powerful wizards to ever live, you'd think you'd want to look a little better than that, right? It was also ironic that, in a way, I was the total opposite. 18 years old with long black hair and vibrant green eyes, and thank the creator of Alandra for that. Lord Sycorath thrust his hand out, his long, skinny fingers splayed wide, and a dark purple ball of magic shot out of his palm, hurling towards me. I knew what to do, though it was mostly instinct, as I had never used magic before today. I tossed up my own hand, spreading my own fingers wide, and a thick, bright white barrier formed around me. The dark purple ball struck the shield and shattered into countless embers that drifted harmlessly to the ground before disintegrating into nothing.
Ah, Lord Sycorath said, you are indeed strong, just as she foretold. Very impressive.
She? He must have meant Lady Hannix, his talented personal prophet who foretold I, and I alone, would have the power to defeat him when I turned 18. Father, an incredibly powerful wizard in his own right, had also been able to predict that. I couldn't help but smile despite the nerve-wracking situation. Why, thank you, Lord Sycorath. This is going to work. It's really going to work.
But unfortunately, you are not strong enough.
He flung his palm up again, and a dark purple hand twice the size of the ball emerged from it, formed a fist, and hurtled toward me across the roof like the ball had. I flew up my barrier again, and a deafening thud rang out as the fist struck it. But the fist didn't immediately shatter and disintegrate like the ball had. Instead, it opened and dug its sharp nails into the barrier, raking back and forth. A grating noise like knives scratching across ceramic plates filled the rooftop, making me cringe. No, this can't be happening. I summoned as much magic as I could, the now familiar, warm, fuzzy feeling permeating me as I dug deep inside myself, and poured it all into the barrier, making it as strong as I possibly could. But it wasn't working. The dark purple nails clawed through the shield, getting closer and closer to scraping right against me. No, this isn't what's supposed to happen. This isn't how the battle's supposed to go. The gaping blackness of Lord Sycorath's hood kept gazing at me as I struggled to maintain my barrier.
"But I'm afraid it is how this battle is going, young Mara,"
he said, clearly reading my mind somehow. And so far he was right. Even worse, I could feel the very last of my magical energy draining away as the hand entered my shield. Pretty soon, I wouldn't have a single shred left inside me. I didn't even know that was even possible. Finally, the nails broke completely through the barrier, shattering it. White embers flew everywhere, disintegrating before they touched the ground or my brown cloak. I barely heard my own scream as Lord Sycorath's purple hand wrapped around me, pinning my arms to my sides. I squirmed, struggling as hard as I could to wrench myself from his grip, but I couldn't budge a millimeter. I was completely drained, mentally, physically, and magically. Please don't tell me it's over. Please, great creator of Alondra, it can't be over. The hand lifted me off the ground and positioned me right above the Dark Lord. Now I could make out his sunken face and all black eyes within the dimness of his hood. I would have cringed if I weren't bound.
"I'm sorry, Mara, but it looks like Lady Hannox and your father were wrong all along. Very, very wrong. You see, you're clearly not powerful enough to defeat the likes of me. Not even close. You never were, and you never will be. And I'll make absolute certain of that last one right this very moment."
He tossed back his head and let out a deafening cackle that echoed inside my mind as the hand moved off to the side of the roof and released me. As I plummeted toward the dark, murky abyss below, all I could do was scream. I failed you, Mother, Father, Alondra. I failed you all. Chapter 1. I awoke with a start, my forehead and the palms of my hands so clammy and cold I felt as if I'd been lying underground for years. Lord Sycorath's evil cackle lingered in my head like a flickering candle flame, gradually fading. A nightmare. Only a nightmare. I'd fallen asleep during the day as usual, my head resting on the partially rotting log in the middle of the grassy yard in front of Mother's cabin. An all-too-familiar chortle came from somewhere high above me. I didn't even bother to glance up. Mother's and my baby pet dragon, Falzar, undoubtedly flew in circles a dozen or so feet above the yard, also as usual.
"Have another lovely dream?"
he chirped. I grumbled as I sat up straight and dusted wood chips off the back of my head.
"Let me guess, you are having trouble defeating the great Lord Sycorath yet again."
I let out a weary sigh as I ran my hand through my hair, hunting for any last chips.
"Aha! I knew it!"
All right, that's true. Only this time, he defeated me. The dream's eerie images flitted back to me and I shuddered. The battle wasn't supposed to have happened that way, and it definitely wasn't supposed to have ended that way, not in the slightest bit.
"Oh, really? Well, that's the first time it's turned out quite like that, now isn't it, young Mara?"
I shrugged, dropping my hands into my lap. I suppose so. There was a light gust of wind as he swooped down and perched his tiny body, about half the size of my head, beside me on the log. He was undoubtedly staring at me with those yellow, unblinking eyes on that scaly, tomato-red face of his, but I continued to gaze straight ahead.
Well, don't you think that's just the tiniest little bit troubling, Mara?"
"Oh, I don't know about that, Falzar."
"Oh, come on now, be honest. You know you always can be with me."
He continued to stare at me, and I kept gazing straight ahead.
"Mara!"
"Oh, all right. I guess maybe it's a tiny, teensy-weensy bit troubling." He gave his wings a sharp little flap.
"Well, I should certainly think so, young lady. In fact, I have to say, I'm a tad worried about you."
"I don't believe you have the privilege to call me young lady when you are a mere baby dragon yourself." I gave Falzar a knowing smirk. "And why are you worried?"
"Well, these nightmares.
They must mirror a very real fear you have of not being able to defeat the Dark Lord. You know, when you become of age." Ugh, he was completely accurate. He always seemed to know exactly what I was thinking or feeling. Well, I guessed he should, since he's been Mother's and my pet for 4 whole years now. I still remembered the day she came home with him and shared the horrible story of how she found him. She'd been out on one of her daily hunting trips when she came across his den, which had been empty except for him. Dragons never abandon a newborn, so his parents must have been killed by a pack of filthy, good-for-nothing Shadriths. Indeed, Falzar was extremely lucky to have been alive himself. "You know what?" I said. "I think you're right. I think deep down a part of me is afraid I won't be able to defeat Lord Sycorath when I'm 18. Like maybe I won't be powerful enough even by then after all."
"I knew it. But that's complete and utter nonsense, Mara. I mean, of course you'll be powerful enough."
"But how can you know for sure? And how can Mother and how did Father know for sure?" There was a long pause as Falzar grumbled to himself.
"Mara, your father was one of the wisest and most powerful wizards in all the history of Alandra. If anybody knew about his own daughter's magical potential and destiny, it was him. And your honest, kind-hearted mother most certainly wouldn't lie about that. So you have absolutely nothing to worry about, okay? Nothing at all."
I let those thoughts roll around in my head, then slowly sink into the sludge pool all my gloomy ones eventually gathered in. But what if somehow they're wrong? Both of them, and have been all along. What if my full powers turn out to be a lot weaker than they thought? Or what if I don't know how to use them correctly when I finally get them? I can't train with magic before I finally fight Lord Sycorath, after all. I popped to my feet and drifted over to the edge of the cabin's property, the horrific question swirling around in my head like a black tornado. I gazed out at the thick trees that surrounded the tiny wooden cabin and yard on all sides. The giant gold X's midway up along the first row stared back at me. If I ever wandered past that row, I would leave the tiny magical realm that protected Mother, Falzar, and me from Lord Sycorath and his awful army of Shadriths. Father created the realm right before he died, but after 7 days of fighting the Dark Lord, he'd been fatally wounded and too weak to infuse a magical current into the realm. Without one, it was impossible to use magic here, even to train or practice. That was another reason I had to defeat Lord Sycorath at all costs, to avenge Father's death once and for all, not just for him, but for Mother and me as well.
"Don't be ridiculous, Mara. Of course your parents have been right all along."
Falzar was flying above me again, the wind his tiny red wings generated wafting against the top of my head and fluttering my hair a bit.
"And of course you'll be able to defeat Lord Sycorath. You must calm down and listen to reason. Indeed, what has caused such troubling thoughts to haunt you so much lately?"
"Well, to be completely honest, I think it has something to do with the fact that I just turned 11, and it just sort of hit me. I still haven't seen the outside world, like, not even a single tiny bit of it. I mean, I've never even been beyond the cabin realm, for the great creator of Alandra's sake." Falzar swooped down and perched on one of my shoulders.
"Well, yes, that's true, but you know very well why that's the case, young lady."
Yes, I know. Lord Sycorath and his Shadriths made Alandra an extremely dangerous and frightening place, that was for sure. And if I were to have even a speck of a chance of finally ending the Dark Lord's horrific reign, I had to keep out of their way until I was ready to. And, well, all my life I've had to rely solely on Mother and her books to tell me everything about the world. Besides, I feel like I don't really know anyone. Falzar sharply flapped his wings.
Ahem.
Well, aside from you and Mother, of course, but I hardly see Mother. I don't know, I just feel like I should know more people, you know? We were both silent a moment, a refreshing breeze wafting through the yard. I looked back at Falzar. In any case, Alandra is clearly such an incredible, complex place. It just makes me think maybe Mother and perhaps even Father overlooked something important, or simply got something wrong, something that greatly impacts my magical destiny and therefore Sycorath's terrible reign. I mean, it's possible, don't you think? Falzar was silent a moment, then shifted his perch slightly on my shoulder.
"I suppose so, Mara, but like you said, your magical destiny is of utmost importance. If they were to overlook or be wrong about something, I most certainly don't think it would have anything to do with that, of all things. Plus, Mother is still well acquainted with Alandra, you know that."
Well, yes, that was all true.
"Now," Falzar said, "speaking of books, why don't we head on inside now and take a look at them for a little while? Perhaps it'll calm your mind a tad."
That was a great idea, actually. There wasn't much else to do around here anyway. The absolute worst thing about the cabin realm. I took one last look at the thick trees, imagining the tall, gangly shade-drifts most likely lurking just beyond them in the mire. The cabin realm existed smack dab in the middle of a gigantic swamp. The terrible creatures, along with Lord Sycorath, didn't even know the realm was here. If you were to walk by this area out in the real world of Alondra, you'd pop right from one end of the realm to the other, totally unaware that you just passed right through it. Father really had to be an incredibly powerful wizard to have created such an amazing thing. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if I had enough magical power at my tender age to destroy at least one Shadrith, or even maybe more. How many could I actually demolish right this very moment? I guess I'd never know. Like Falzar suggested, he and I headed across the yard toward the cabin. As we did, he flew from my shoulder and huffed a small ball of fire into the air a few yards above me, close enough for me to feel a little of its heat on the top of my head. He always did that before he went inside, since he wasn't allowed to do it in there. It was like he had to get it out of his system while he still could, that funny little bugger. Inside, we headed over to Mother's shelf in the main room, and I removed one of the large paper-bound books from it. I laid the book on the floor and sprawled out in front of it, Falzar perching on the back of my shoulder this time. As usual, we gazed down at the pages as I slowly flipped them. Unfortunately, neither of us could read. Mother was always too busy hunting or too exhausted to teach us, but she read them to us all the same. I still enjoyed looking at the writing and sometimes imagining what it said, though. Some of the books were full of tales of Alondra, such as legendary quests by some of the most powerful wizards to ever live, including Father. Others were spell books we couldn't even use, at least not in the cabin realm. Many of the books had colorful illustrations, my favorite parts. Even though Falzar and I had seen them all countless times, I still lingered on the most beautiful ones for at least a few minutes. He never argued. After looking through a few books, I must have dozed again, as I awoke when Mother's tall, thin figure bustled into the cabin. I got my slenderness and black hair from her, but my petiteness and green eyes from Father. Mother was carrying a large gulak skin bag, as usual, which she plopped by the kitchen table. The light metallic scent of raw meat immediately filled the room, making my stomach quiver with hunger. I sighed with relief whenever she returned. Leaving the cabin realm was always potentially dangerous, if not deadly, but Mother had to do it. A part of me always hoped, no, prayed, to the great creator of Alondra that I'd be able to defeat Lord Sycorath before something horrible happened to her. I popped to my feet and wrapped her in an enormous hug. "Hello, Mother. How was your day?"
"Oh, it was fine, my dear sweet Mara."
She pulled away.
"And hello to you as well, Falzar."
"Why, thank you for the fanfare, Mother," Falzar grumbled, hovering in the middle of the room.
"Still, it is nevertheless great to see you back safe and sound once again."
"Why, thank you, honey." Mother hung her long black cloak, complete with the Emerald Fulgrod family crest on the breast, on the hanger by the door, revealing her thin, white underdress and making her look even skinnier.
"How were both your days?"
"Oh, you know," I said, "same as usual. Well, sort of, except for that horrible nightmare."
"I devoured a bird and flew 100 laps around the cabin," Falzar said.
He said it so resolutely, so proudly, I almost laughed. He must have done all that while I was napping.
"Well, that's excellent to hear."
Mother used the large white candle on the table to start a fire in the fireplace. Then she poured water from the gourd into the cauldron hanging above the fire. She must have noticed the somewhat gloomy expression on my face as she said,
"You look a little off this evening, Mara.
Is something the matter?" She began transferring the raw pieces of gulak meat from the bag into the cauldron. "Oh, I suppose I should tell her. Actually, yes, there is something the matter, Mother." Falzar sighed as he landed on the kitchen table. Mother stopped transferring the meat and hurried over to me.
"Well, what is it, honey? What's wrong? Please tell Mother."
She clasped both my hands in hers and gazed hard into my eyes. Well, it's just that lately I've been having these really strange dreams."
"Strange dreams? What do you mean, strange dreams? Like nightmares?"
Yes, I suppose you could say so." She tightened her grip on my hands so much they hurt a little.
"Well, what about them, honey? What about these nightmares? Please tell, Mother."
So I did, including the latest one. I suppose I'm worried I somehow actually won't be able to defeat Lord Sikarath when the time comes, or that I won't know how to use my powers correctly when I do. I mean, how can we really know for sure I'll be able to conquer the great Dark Lord like Father said, especially since there's no way to even train with magic in the cabin realm? A short silence filled the room. Falzar was shaking his head from his perch on the table, looking down at his tiny clawed feet, mumbling so low I couldn't hear him. "Oh, honey." Mother crouched and wrapped me in a bone-crushing hug. I hugged back just as hard. When she withdrew, keeping her head level with mine, her eyes misting over.
"Of course you'll be able to defeat the Dark Lord. There isn't a single doubt in all of Elandra. I'm absolutely positive, all right, so please stop worrying about it."
But how can you be so sure?" She let out a light sigh.
"Oh, honey, I must have told you 1,000 times. Your father was one of the greatest, wisest, and most powerful wizards in the history of Elandra. If anybody knew about the magical potential and destiny of his own daughter, he certainly did."
I could barely make out Falzar rolling his eyes out of the corner of my eye.
"Told you,"
he mouthed. But what if he was wrong? My voice cracked on that last word. The idea was just too horrifying. After all, the entire world and all its wonderful magical creatures were relying on me to destroy the Dark Lord and his wretched army of Shadriths. If I failed, he would continue his utterly awful reign, maybe even forever. It was terrible enough everybody still had to wait 7 whole years for me to get my full powers, so I could at least try to defeat him. Who knew what abominable things he was doing to the good, innocent creatures of Elandra right this very moment? Perhaps Mother even knew a bit about that, but didn't want to tell me because of how young I still was and how horrendous it was. The tears started to spill, rolling along my cheeks and wetting my brown cloak's collar. It was just too much. There was far too much pressure on me, and I had far too much doubt.
Oh, honey."
Mother wrapped me in another enormous hug, squeezing me even tighter this time.
"Don't cry. Please don't cry. Everything will be completely fine, you'll see. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. Really, I promise. Cross my heart and hope Lord Sikarath strikes me dead right this very moment."
But full-on sobs rocked my body now, and wouldn't stop. I'd never felt so hopeless and powerless. Mother pulled back suddenly.
"Honey, stop. Please stop."
But I couldn't.
"Honey, please. You must stop well, you see."
She flickered her gaze up at the ceiling, then back at me.
"Your father, before he died, he created an extremely powerful weapon."
The sobs kept coming, but I managed to keep my gaze on her now dark, crisp eyes.
"And this magical weapon, you're destined to use it, honey. You know,
when you become of age."
"Really?"
I somehow got out.
"Yes, absolutely. And this magical weapon, it'll make what are sure to be your already incredible magical powers even more incredible and magical. 5 times as much, in fact."
"Really?" She nodded very hard.
"Yes, you see, Mara, the Dark Lord won't even have a chance. Not even the tiniest, flimsiest smidgen of a chance in all of Elandra. And don't worry, the weapon is easy to use. You don't even need to practice any magic to operate it. Your father tested it himself before he, passed on."
Her eyes grew a tad blurry at Father's mention, but quickly cleared up.
"So, he, and therefore I, know for an absolute fact that it works, and you'll be able to obliterate the Dark Lord with it. There is no doubt whatsoever."
"Really?" The sobs finally started to ease up. This was exactly what I needed to hear. Something real, something tangible in a sense, that gave me actual hope I'd be able to pull off such a miraculous feat a few years from now.
"That's right, honey. I didn't want to tell you before because, I wanted to wait until you were ready to use the weapon. It's an enormous responsibility, after all, and incredibly hush-hush. Lord Sycorath must never catch wind of this precious device at any cost. You understand, of course, right, honey?"
"Yes, of course, Mother," as if he possibly could due to the cabin realm and all, but still.
"Excellent. So don't cry any more, okay? Like I said, everything will be completely fine, you'll see."
She wiped some of the tears away from her long, spindly fingers and dried them on her underdress.
"All right?"
"Okay." I had to admit I felt immensely better. Thank goodness Father created such an amazing weapon, although I didn't feel completely better. I swept my gaze around the cabin. "So where is this magical weapon, Mother? I was pretty sure I'd never seen it before, and this cabin only had 2 rooms and hardly any extra space as far as I knew." She ran her fingers through my hair now, pulling strands away from my tear-stained face.
"It doesn't matter, honey. Just know it's here safe and sound and ready for you to use when the time comes, okay?"
"But I want to know, Mother, and I want to see it. Please show it to me."
"Oh, honey, really, it truly doesn't matter. Pretty please."
"It'll help me feel better. I just had to see it. I mean, such a miraculous device had been here in this cabin all 11 years of my life, and I'd never laid my gaze on it." She stopped pulling strands of hair away from my face and looked at me long and hard.
"All right, honey."
She got up and opened the cabinet on the far right above the kitchen counter. Ah, of course. I'd never seen inside that particular cabinet before. I guess I always figured it just contained more plates, bowls, and silverware like the other ones. She carefully pulled out a large, long, and skinny object that appeared to be mostly made of metal, hefting it in both hands. A couple parts were wooden, though, including the far end, which was a bit wider than the rest. Just past the larger wooden segment, a small circle of metal jutted from the bottom. I had to admit, the device did look powerful. A shiver, a good one though, rippled along my spine. I'd get to use that amazing thing one day. I, and only I, would finally get to finish off Lord Sycorath with it.
"See? Here it is."
She gave it a quick twirl in her hands, then carefully placed it back inside the cabinet and closed the door. Then she focused a stern gaze on me.
"But it's best left alone until you're ready to use it, okay? Please tell me you'll stay away from it and the cabinet until you're 18 years of age and ready to defeat Lord Sycorath once and for all. Please promise me, honey."
"Yes, yes, of course I will, Mother. And thank you for showing it to me. It truly did make me feel so much better."
"Now there's a good girl."
And she went back to preparing dinner. As we ate that evening, she explained how she took down the gulak in the gulak skin bag, as usual. It was always impressive, since gulaks were incredibly fast, silver-furred, deer-like creatures that lived in the thick forests at the base of the gigantic mountain on which Lord Sycorath's castle perched. Plus, that area, which was all the way across Alandra, was always swarming with shade-drifts, so it was extremely risky. But Mother was incredibly good at making the trip, and gulaks were so tasty. I never got tired of eating them. After dinner, in the loft above the kitchen, Mother reread one of my favorite tales of Alandra from one of her books to Falzar and me. The story told of how the legendary fairy Gurklon defeated the evil ancient dragon Clarganaw using solely his wits. He couldn't even use his impressive magic because Clarganaw was somehow immune to all magic. Then Mother went to her own bedroom to do her own reading before sleep. She was constantly bringing new books home from the underground market, as no one was allowed to read in Alandra under Lord Sycorath's reign, and if a book happened to have an interesting enough story, she sometimes read it to Falzar and me too, before returning it to the market so someone else could read it next. While she did her own reading, Falzar and I nestled beneath the thin cover on my mattress, which hugged the ground. There wasn't room for anything else in the loft, really.
"See?"
Falzar said, both of us gazing up at the log ceiling where I could make out all the individual logs neatly nestled together.
"I told you everything would be fine. You're sure to grow into your amazing powers when you're 18, and your father created an extremely powerful weapon for when you battle Lord Sycorath. It'll be as easy as gulak pie. You'll see."
Yes, I suppose so. Even though I did feel a lot better now, I wasn't about to admit that to Falzar.
"Oh, I know so. Now, off to sleep, little Mara."
"You too, little Falzar." I didn't have any more nightmares that night, but the next day, a real-life nightmare began. Chapter 2. The next morning I ate breakfast with Mother and Falzar before Mother went off to hunt more gulaks. Then I wandered around the yard outside, making sure to stay within the boundary. After that I dozed on the partially rotting log. And then, around mid-morning, Falzar and I went inside to leaf through some of Mother's books again. I usually did that exact pattern twice a day, once before Mother came home for lunch, and again before she arrived for dinner. But this morning, I didn't even make it to the bookshelf. I froze midway across the main room, my gaze riveted to the cabinet above the kitchen counter, the one on the far right that contained the magical weapon. Stop it, Mara. Don't focus on that. Mother showed you the weapon yesterday, and you promised not to go near it until you're of age. Still, Mother had only given me a glimpse of the weapon. I hadn't gotten to see it up close and personal, really examine it, perhaps even touch it. Besides, what was the big deal if I did any of those things? It wasn't like I could activate it, even accidentally, since the cabin realm didn't contain a magic current, and such a powerful magical weapon would definitely need one to be used. Besides, I didn't even have my full powers yet. Mara, stop it. You know better. You must heed Mother's wishes. Stay away from the cabinet and weapon. So I forced myself to look away and continue toward the bookcase, but I couldn't help but stop again right before I reached it and slowly turned my head back toward the cabinet. Naughty, naughty! I almost jumped at Falzar's voice. He was currently perched on the kitchen table. Stop looking at the cabinet, Mara. You know you're not supposed to go near it. I know. I snapped my head back to the bookcase and ran my hand along a row of books, their spines thick, aged leather soft against my skin. Such a comforting feeling. But I couldn't focus on the lovely sensation very long. My hand stopped on the spine of a particularly large hardcover book, trembling slightly. You know, I said, it wouldn't be such a terrible thing to take a peek up close at the weapon, now would it? You know, just a teensy-weensy one? I mean, what could really be the harm, right? Falzar flew into the air, fluttering especially loudly, and landed on top of the bookcase. He gazed down at me with a pair of narrow, beady eyes that glimmered in the light cast by the flames in the sconces of the walls. Absolutely not. Mother made it perfectly clear that you're not even to think about doing such a thing, and you don't want to upset her, do you? But she doesn't have to know. All I do is open up the cabinet, take a really quick look at the weapon up close, and then close it. That's all. And then I won't go anywhere near it the whole rest of the day, or the whole 7 years until I'm ready to use it. I mean, really, there's no harm in that, especially since there's not even a magic current in the cabin realm. Falzar quivered his little wings and shuffled his tiny clawed feet. I don't like it, Mara. Not one bit. Goes against Mother's rules. She's been such a great mother all these years, you know, both to you and me. And she'd be so very upset with you if... But I was barely paying attention. I picked up one of the 2 kitchen table chairs, placed it in front of the counter, and stepped onto it. Oh, Mara, you're asking for it now. You really are. Stop it, right this moment, seriously, before... I reached out and gripped the cabinet handle, then slowly pulled the cabinet open. Mara, stop! There it was, nestled neatly inside. I reached out and placed a finger on the metal, which was cool to the touch, and sent a light shiver along my spine. Mara, you are only going to take a peek. Now go on and close the cabinet right this very moment. I mean it, young lady. But the weapon looks so amazing. And dangerous, even though it was obviously safe here in the cabin realm. I bet it'll easily destroy Lord Sycorath. You have to come take a closer look, Falzar. Come over and take a little peek for yourself. Oh, I'd really rather not, Mara. It sounds like he was still perched on the bookcase across the room. Now, please, kindly close the cabinet door right this very moment and hop down from there. Mother will be back soon, and... Yeah, but not for a little while. I grabbed part of the metal portion of the weapon with both hands and slowly pulled the whole thing out of the cabinet, though its weight nearly yanked me right off the chair. I had to hastily adjust my footing and brace myself by nudging my elbow against the side of the counter. Dang, this thing was heavier than I thought. I could barely hear Falzar squawking madly as I jumped down from the chair and changed my grip, placing one hand under the large wooden part at one end and the other under the smaller one under the metal part. It just felt natural. "Hey, look," I said. "There's a little hole in this thing, at the end of the long, skinny metal part facing me."
"I bet that's where the magic flies out when you use the weapon. But seriously, Mara, you should..."
But I turned him out again as I turned the mysterious object around. I wonder what this is. I studied the small circle of metal that jutted from the bottom of the weapon just past the larger wooden segment. A tiny curl of metal resided inside that. I placed my finger along the inside of the curl. It just felt right, then pushed against it a little. The curl of metal gave a bit. I wonder. I pushed a little harder, and the curl gave a little more. Then it suddenly whipped violently backwards, even farther, along the whole weapon, a thunderous noise ringing out. The momentum kicked me backwards, and I slammed my head and back against the wooden cabinets below the counter, then slumped to the ground. Searing pain flashed through me, deafening ringing filling my ears. Haziness took over me as though I were lost in a cloud filled with multiple magic currents.
"Mara! Mara!" Falzar squawked.
Chapter 3. I lay on the floor for a moment, pain stinging my head and back, my ears still ringing. Finally, it all started to die down and go away, including the haziness.
"Mara, are you okay?"
Falzar kept crying. He was flying in frenzied circles right above me. I sat up straight, rubbed the back of my head. A bruise was already pushing up there. The magical weapon lay on the ground in front of me. I hadn't even realized I'd dropped it. Yes, I believe so.
"Oh, thank goodness."
Falzar perched on the floor beside me.
"Oh, Mara, I told you this was an absolutely dreadful idea. Put that horrible thing away right now."
Yes, I think that's a good idea. And then I realized something else. Oh no. No.
What is it?
Falzar's eyes were the size of fireballs he was constantly spouting. I'd never seen him look so scared. I pointed at the table. It was completely broken, lying in a jumble of different sized pieces all across the floor, a couple of small chunks next to Falzar and me. Falzar shook his head slowly as he beheld the wreckage himself.
"Oh, Gulak scat! Now you've really done it, Mara. Wait until Mother comes home and sees this atrocious mess. Not only that, she'll know you used the magical weapon as well."
I know. I put my hands to my head, pinched my hair between my fingers so hard my scalp burned. We'll have to try to put it all back together again before she comes home for lunch. But first... I picked up the weapon, grasping the large wooden part with one hand and the long metal part with the other. It was really awfully heavy.
"Mara, be careful," Falzar squawked.
I know. Don't worry. I won't activate it by accident. I have to squeeze the tiny metal curly thing with my finger to do that. And I won't even touch that part.
"You better be right about that, young lady."
I climbed back onto the chair, but before I could place the weapon back in the cabinet, I saw there were a couple of other things in there too, sitting toward the back, shrouded in dimness. I must have been so excited about seeing that weapon up close, so incredibly stupid of me, that I hadn't noticed them before. But I wasn't sure what they were. They looked like some kind of small gold metal can, the other a large brush of sorts resting on top of it.
"What is it?"
Falzar asked from his perch on the floor.
"Why are you stalling, Mara?"
Oh, no reason. No point mentioning the mysterious objects to him. I'd already gone and been a complete idiot by opening the cabinet in the first place. Falzar had been right all along. I should have listened to him. And Mother. I hefted the weapon higher, careful to keep the end with the hole away from me just in case, and eased it inside the cabinet. Then I closed the cabinet and hopped down off the chair. Then something hit me. Wait a minute. How could I have activated the weapon, even if accidentally? The cabin realm doesn't have a magic current, so it shouldn't be possible at all. Falzar flapped his wings hard beside me on the floor, his silence telling me he was thinking hard.
"I admit that's a very good question, Mara, and I certainly don't have the answer. But either way, I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for it. Now let's clean up this mess."
Yeah, but I couldn't fight the feeling something was off here. Horribly off. Had Mother lied to me? Or was she just plain wrong about the fact the weapon could be used in the cabin realm? Was my recent enormous fear actually true? That Father and perhaps Mother could be wrong about something that had to do with my magical destiny? The disturbing questions kept spinning around in my head as Falzar and I tried to clean up the broken table, but unfortunately, it was impossible. There were so many tiny pieces lying among the bigger ones that it was hard to even figure out how they all went together. And then there was the bigger problem of not being able to actually attach them to one another once we figured that out. Plus, if all that wasn't enough, there was yet another stranger issue too. Hidden among the large jumble of pieces were a few tiny silver balls, which definitely weren't part of the table. Falzar and I couldn't recognize them at all, which meant they must have come from the weapon. We didn't even want to touch them in case they were full of dark, potentially dangerous magic. So, unfortunately, everything was pretty much still a huge mess when Mother came back for lunch a little while later, carrying a gulak skin bag as usual. As I expected, she took in the room with one sweep of her gaze, then dropped the bag and clapped both her hands to her face.
"Oh, Mara, what in the illustrious history of Alandra have you done?"
She rushed up to me and gripped my shoulder so hard it hurt, giving me a quick, thorough look up and down.
"Are you all right, sweetheart? Are you?"
"Yes," I murmured. "I'm fine, Mother, and so is Falzar." Of course I wasn't fine, not at all. I'd disobeyed her. I'd done exactly what she told me not to do, and broken the kitchen table. I was the worst daughter ever. As I expected, her face morphed a deep scarlet, her arms trembling so hard they shook my shoulders.
"Mara, you deliberately disobeyed me. I told you not to even peek at the magical weapon, but what do? You not only go ahead and do so, but you actually activate the hazardous thing, and as a result destroy the only table in the cabin realm. You could have been horribly, horribly hurt, if not killed, both you and Falzar. What do you have to say for yourself, young lady?"
It was hard to meet her eyes, but somehow I managed. My own lips quivered as I said, "I don't know, Mother." What I really wanted to do was ask her how it was even possible to activate the weapon in the cabin realm in the first place. But now was not the time, not even remotely.
"You don't know? You don't know?"
She yanked her hands from my shoulders and stood back, stabbing me with a gaze as sharp as a full-grown dragon's tooth. Her facial features were so tight it seemed her entire head would explode any second.
"Is this the thanks I get, Mara? Is this the thanks I get for everything I've done for you over the past 11 years of your life? For raising you? For giving you unconditional love and support? Heck, for even bringing back Falzar a few years ago so you'd have somebody to keep you company while I was out hunting all day long."
"Huh?" But before she said she brought him back to raise him since his parents had been killed by Shadriths. Still, I had to thank the great creator of Alandra since she had done that. I'd been so hopelessly lonely until Falzar came along. Sure, Mother was my mother, but Falzar was my only friend. I opened my mouth to say I was sorry, but she continued.
"Oh, and speaking of hunting, every single day I go out into the incredibly dangerous world of Alandra to take down a gulak. Or two if I'm lucky. Just so you, Falzar, and I actually have something to eat around here on a regular basis. And is this the thanks I get for all that as well?"
My gaze dropped to the floor again. It took every last bit of willpower I had left to shake my head, my vision growing blurry. There was no denying it, no way. I'd done it. I'd done it big this time. "No, Mother, you don't deserve this. Not a single bit. I'm a terrible daughter. The worst in all the history of Alandra. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry."
"You had better be, young lady. Now off to the loft with you without lunch. Hopefully an empty stomach for the rest of the afternoon will make you realize the despicable error of your ways."
Yes, of course, Mother. So sorry again, Mother." I began heading toward the stairs that led up to the loft.
"And never touch the magical weapon again. Do you hear me, young lady? Don't even open the cabinet where it is stored. Do you understand me?"
I turned back around. "Yes, of course, Mother. I swear I won't. And this time I really mean it."
"You had better."
I rushed upstairs and sprawled on my mattress, tears streaming down my cheeks now. This was easily the worst day of my life, by far. I disobeyed and hurt Mother, one of the two people, including Falzar, I cared about most in this cold, cruel world, incredibly badly. How could she ever forgive me for this? Would she ever forgive me for this? Please tell me she will. Please, great creator of Elandra. Falzar flew up and landed beside me on the mattress. He opened his mouth, but I said, "Don't say it. I know you were right. I should have listened to you all along." He closed his mouth, then leaned against me, nuzzling his snout under my chin. That was how we fell asleep, but I was so horribly depressed about what I'd done I slept the entire rest of the day, then the whole night. Non-stop nightmares about Mother, Lord Sycorath, and the magical weapon haunted me the entire time. Chapter 4. As I expected, breakfast the next morning was incredibly uncomfortable. Mother, Falzar, and I hardly said a word. We just ate quietly at the table, which was somehow put back together again. "How?" was the first thing I asked when I came down from the loft and sat at it.
"I had to move all the pieces outside the cabin realm and use magic to bind them all back together again."
Mother swallowed a spoonful of gulak stew.
"Then I had to carry the whole thing back inside, and believe me, it's a lot heavier than it looks, especially because of my bad back."
Oh, I hadn't even known she had a bad back. She'd never mentioned that to me before. Or Falzar, as far as I knew. I wondered how she got it, but now was definitely not the time to ask. Poor Mother.
"It took all last evening, too. I was terribly sore and tired when the whole ordeal was finally finished, and I was incredibly lucky there didn't happen to be any shadriths lurking around while I did it either. Extremely risky and dangerous. But it had to be done now, didn't it?"
She shot me a glare that would have made Lord Sycorath himself wither until he looked like a 100-year-old apple. "Yes, I'm sorry, Mother. Very, very sorry." She grunted. As I ate from my bowl of gulak stew, I couldn't ignore the burning question I had any longer. "Mother?" She looked up at me from her stew, eyes still sharp and narrowed.
"Yes?"
I swallowed hard, let my gaze wander to the small square windows framing the cabin door behind her. Well, you've always told me the cabin realm doesn't have a magic current, so, I guess what I'm asking is, how was I able to activate the magical weapon in the first place if it's impossible to even use magic here? So I guess what I'm asking is, how was I able to activate the magical weapon in the first place if it's impossible to even use magic here? Both she and Falzar stared at me, their expressions blank. Mother of Gulak Scat, I shouldn't have asked. I really shouldn't have. Then Mother blinked rapidly a few times, her face paling a couple of shades. Finally, she said in a voice a bit like a shadrith's predatory hiss,
"You deliberately disobey me and completely demolish the kitchen table with the magical weapon? And you have the audacity to ask me such a pesky, nonsensical question, young lady. Well, I'm not going to dignify it with an answer. You've made it perfectly clear you're incapable of being trusted with the magical weapon or anything pertinent to your future. At least not yet. So, for the time being, I'm not going to tell you anything more about it."
And with that, she went back to eating, silence filling the table except for Falzar's usual loud slurps as he ate. They seemed a little extra loud this time, though, probably out of discomfort. As for me, a barrage of chills whipped down my spine. Yikes. Well, that had certainly been strange and unnerving, though I guessed I couldn't blame her. All this really was my fault, after all. When we all finished, she left the cabin to go hunting again, and I stayed at the table, idly swishing my spoon through the thick brown stew. Even though I hadn't eaten either lunch or dinner yesterday, I wasn't very hungry this morning. Falzar was still finishing up his soup, his tiny red snout stuffed in his bowl. As he did, I couldn't help but glance at the cabinet the magical weapon lay in, even though it hurt both my eyes and soul to do it. "Oh." Falzar looked up from his bowl, brown stew coating his snout. He'd always been a bit of a messy eater.
"What is it?"
"The cabinet. It looks as though Mother locked it up yesterday, or maybe this morning." A small, round metal object was lodged midway along the cabinet's handle, part of it wrapped around the handle.
"Yes, it looks like she did, and a good thing, too. Now you can't hurt her, or anybody or anything anymore." Ouch!
It was like Falzar just struck his claws right into my heart and raked them around. Yes, it was going to take a long time for me to get over this whole horrible magical weapon thing, there was no doubt about it, and for Mother to trust me again. Seriously, what a complete and utter fool I'd been. No, looks like I can't. But I learned my lesson, Falzar, really, I did.
"Good."
He stuck his snout back into his bowl, more loud slurps filling the room. But as I sat there, continuing to stew over the whole awful thing, something still wasn't sitting quite right with me about it. Sure, Mother was extremely upset because I disobeyed her and activated the weapon, and sure, because of that she refused to answer my question about it, but that didn't change the fact that what happened was something she said would never happen. Ever. It was supposed to be impossible to use the weapon in the cabin, which meant Mother had to have been lying, perhaps even from the very beginning. I mean, there was simply no other explanation. I mentioned that to Falzar, and he removed his snout from his bowl again, his whole body going rigid.
"Mara, I don't like where you're going with this. Of course Mother wasn't lying. She wouldn't lie to you. She's just very upset, that's all, and for good reason if you ask me."
"Then how else do you explain how I activated the weapon?"
"Well,
He scrunched up his whole face like he sometimes did when he was thinking extremely hard, his eyes shrinking to tiny slits.
"Gah! I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation, like I said before. You're just too young and immature to know what it is yet, like Mother basically just said."
I let that roll around in my head as my gaze wandered back to the cabinet. No, I don't think that's the case. What happened with the magical weapon? It wasn't supposed to happen. Ever. She has to be lying, or at least wrong about something. Very, very wrong. And if she's lying or wrong, then I can't help but wonder what else she's been lying or is wrong about. And all this time as well. Falzar gave his wings a particularly sharp flap.
"Mara, that's enough of that talk. Really."
I glanced toward the cabin windows, taking in the green and gold of the line of trees marked with X's just beyond the yard. I headed toward the door.
"Mara, what are you doing?"
I strode out of the cabin, towards the edge of the property.
"Mara, get back here this instant!"
Falzar must have been flying along behind me, as his voice followed me as I went.
"I mean it, young lady. Where do you think you're going?"
"I'm going to see what's beyond the cabin realm. I'm just going to take a peek, see if what Mother said is really out there, and see if there's anybody else living nearby, anybody who could be my friend." But I didn't say that last part. It sounded too sad, too pathetic in a way, though I didn't know why exactly. Falzar soared in front of me, hovering a few inches away from my face.
"Mara, don't be an utter fool again. That is an absolutely horrific idea. Of course Mother's been telling the truth. Of course she isn't wrong about what's beyond the cabin realm. Plus, it's incredibly dangerous out there, and—"
But once again, I turned him out as I pushed past the first line of trees. Chapter 5. My mind flashed back to when I was only 6 years old. I'd been wandering around outside, completely bored as usual, perhaps even partly daydreaming, while Mother prepared lunch in the cabin. At least it was always fantastic weather in the cabin realm, or else I would have been really bored. It hardly ever rained, though it was a nice change of pace when it did, and the cabin realm was pretty much always the perfect temperature. Not too hot, not too cold, all thanks to the magic Father built into it. That's what Mother always claimed, anyway. I idly stumbled past the first line of trees at the edge of the cabin property, and almost immediately a blood-curdling scream came from the direction of the cabin. I froze and whipped around just in time to witness Mother's face vanish from the cabin window. Then the door whipped open, and she raced towards me as fast as she could.
"No, Mara!"
She screamed so loudly birds bolted from the branches of a nearby tree, their wings madly fluttering. I could also feel my mouth drop open as I remained totally still, rooted to the ground, as she lumbered up to me, wrapped both her arms around me, and wrenched me away from the tree line. When we were a few yards from the cabin realm boundary, she unwrapped her arms and pulled away from me, her face soggy with tears, eyes dreary hazel pools. "Oh, Mara, my sweet, sweet Mara. Thank goodness you're okay. Why, you could have been killed, eaten by one of Lord Sycorath's countless evil minions. But thank the great creator of Alandra you're all right, that none of them happened to be around. Oh, I don't know what I'd ever do if I ever lost you. Not to mention the fate of all Alandra, it would be sealed forever. But again, thank the great creator and all her divine virtues, you are all right. Please, promise me, right this very moment, young lady." Of course, Mother. I promise." "Good." I've never seen her so scared, so utterly petrified. In fact, she was so frightened her fear seemed to channel itself right into me, making me shiver uncontrollably. Poor Mother, I should have been paying attention. I should have caught myself before I wandered beyond the boundary, far before. On that fateful day, in that precise moment, I also promised myself I would never go beyond the boundary ever again, not just for Mother's sake, but my own and all of Alandra's as well. "Oh, honey." And she wrapped me in a hug again, both of us forming one large trembling mass. Now I stood back at the cabin realm boundary, frozen between two trees in the first line of them, the memory washing over me. Then something else did as well. Conviction. "Sorry, Mother, but I have to see for myself if you've been telling the truth, if you're hiding something from me, or are even wrong about what's out in the world. And I have to see if there's someone else nearby who I can meet and talk to, someone who could maybe even be my and perhaps even Falzar's and your friend." I thought that. The full fantasy of it gripped me with steel talons. Somebody other than Mother or Falzar to talk to, spend time with. Maybe they could visit the cabin realm as well. Not just to momentarily escape from the horrific danger of the Shadrith and Lord Sycorath, but to read books and eat some gulags too with Mother, Falzar, and me. Oh, what a wonderful treat that would be for us all. And with that marvelous idea branded in my mind, I pushed past the cabin realm boundary for the second time in my life. Chapter 6. The ground immediately became softer, my shoes sinking into mud and sludge as I weaved around trees and bushes. Ah, I was in the mire, so Mother hadn't been lying or wrong about the swamp, at least. "Mara!" Falzar flew directly above me now. "This is enough! More than enough! It's just a bunch of trees and mud and bushes, just like Mother said. Now let's head back to the cabin before we bump into a Shadrith or one of Lord Sycorath's other dark minions, or maybe even Lord Sycorath himself." "Oh, relax, you little nutty dragon. We'll be fine. Let's just go a little further." He let out a grumble much louder than usual as I continued along, trying to step in areas with lots of weeds or undergrowth so Mother wouldn't notice my footsteps when she returned, and also so I didn't track any mud on my shoes. Then something hit me. I should be able to use magic here. We were outside the cabin realm after all. I picked up a nearby stick and I placed it on a moss-coated log. "Oh, what now?" Falzar stopped too, hovering a few feet above me. "Mara, we really should be heading back." "I'm going to make that stick fly up in the air using my magic. That should be easy enough, right?" "Mara, truly, I don't think that's a very good idea. I mean, you haven't been trained to use magic yet. Plus, look what happened with the magical weapon." "True, but that was a big old powerful magical weapon. This is just a tiny flimsy stick." He heaved a deep sigh as I concentrated as hard as I could on the twig, squinting my eyes. "All right, stick. Fly up. Go on now. Fly up into the air." It stayed totally still on the log. "Come on, stick. You can do it. Rise up into the air, high into the sky where Falzar is." But it continued to stay completely still. "Mara, really?" But I reached as deeply as I could within myself, tapping into the enormous reservoir of magic I knew I had, even though I wasn't of age yet,
just like I did in the dream with Lord Sycorath. Come on, Stick. You can do it. Fly. Or at least move a little. Wiggle if that's all you can do, but please do something. The twig still refused to budge even a single millimeter. Ah, confound it! Why wouldn't it move? I stopped concentrating, letting all my muscles relax. Why isn't it working, Falzar? Why isn't the stick moving? I thought I was magical. He flew down and landed beside the stick. You are magical, Mara. You just haven't been trained properly, that's all. Trust me, you'll be able to move mountains and fill valleys with oceans after you finally defeat Lord Sycorath and have been properly trained to use your gigantic reservoir of magic. I sighed, still gazing hard at the stick. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Of course I am, young lady. Now come on, let's head back to the cabin before we bump into something extremely hazardous out here. We've been really pushing our luck as it is. I nodded, but made no effort to leave. Seriously, how could it be possible? How could I not be able to move such a tiny object with my magic? It just didn't make any sense. Especially since I was able to fire the magical weapon inside a cabin Mother always told me magic couldn't be used in. Things were getting fishier and fishier around here. There was absolutely no doubt about it. Then something in the forest beyond the log caught my eye. A hint of a dark blue among the foliage. Wait, there's something up here. I dashed towards a distinct color. Oh, for the sake of burning gulak scat, Falzar muttered. As I came closer, I saw the dark blue was some kind of object about as large as Mother's gulak skin bag, leaning against the base of a tree, and just beyond that, a narrow dirt trail of sorts meandered along through the marsh. Odd. I wonder where that trail goes, and what this is. I knelt beside the object and reached out a finger. Mara, I wouldn't. It could be dangerous. It could even be enchanted with dark magic. But I couldn't help myself. I touched the object. It's just cloth or something like it. But what's this? There was a tiny, narrow silver thing about as long as my thumbnail on top of the object, lining up with a thin woven line of sorts. Instinct gripped me, and I grabbed the silver thing, gently moving it along the woven part. Oh, it's a bag of sorts, and this opens it. Falzar huffed as he landed on the lowest branch of the tree the bag leaned against. Mara, really, this can't be good. It's clearly not your mother's bag. What if it's Lord Sycorath's or some other evil wizard's? What if it contains dark magic that instantly kills whoever opens... I opened the bag wide enough to take a peek inside. What in the... What is it? What is it, Mara? Apparently, curiosity finally got the better of good old Falzar. Chapter 7. It's Mother's clothing. I pulled out the long black cloak she always wore and peered inside the bag. And nothing else. I let the cloak drape my hands. But how? And why? Falzar flew down and perched beside the bag. I admit, that is quite odd, Mara, but we don't know for certain that it's actually Mother's. It could be somebody else's. Quickly, put it back before whoever owns it comes looking for it. But that only made me want to study the cloak more. If it wasn't Mother's, perhaps it belonged to somebody who would become my new friend. Perhaps even hers and Falzar's as well. The very concept made my skin tingle and radiate heat until my whole body felt all nice and toasty. I turned the cloak over in my hands. No, here's the Falgrud family crest on the breast. The emerald color winked in a silver of sunlight that squeezed through the canopy above, and all the heat vacated my body. Oh well, perhaps my new friend was still somewhere close by anyway. It's definitely hers. After all, Mother and I were the only Fulgrod family members left. The rest had all tragically perished in the war Lord Sycorath raged when he was attempting to gain control of Elandra, all their homes and belongings demolished as well. Falzar said. I suppose that does appear to be the case. Very perplexing, then, I must admit. Indeed. Why would Mother stash her cloak in this bag and leave it in the middle of the mire? I mean, she wouldn't be off hunting gulaks only wearing her underdress. Although the silly thought made me want to giggle. It simply doesn't make any sense. I wholeheartedly agree, Mara, but I say we leave them as they are, return to the cabin, and not ask Mother any questions about them. I am certain there is a logical explanation for it all, but asking will only tip her off to the fact that we left the cabin realm and make her extremely angry. And she's already angrier than she ever ought to be as it is. Don't you agree? I let that roll around in my head. But what about finding a new friend? What is that now? But as soon as I said it, I realized how utterly ridiculous it sounded. After all, Valzar and I would be putting ourselves in even more danger searching for somebody. Plus, who was to say that whoever we found, if anyone at all, would even want to be our friend in the first place? And then there was the simple matter that Mother would clearly be so furious with Valzar and me for leaving the cabin realm that she probably wouldn't even allow somebody else to cross the boundary, much less stay for a chat or a bowl of goulash stew, no matter how nice or friendly they appeared. I let out a long, weary sigh. Never mind. I suppose you're right, Valzar. Let's go. Of course I'm right. I placed Mother's cloak back into the bag and zipped it up, and Valzar and I headed back to the cabin. The whole way, I couldn't help but feel horribly deflated. After all, Valzar's and my first real excursion out of the cabin realm in all my 11 years of life only created more questions. It didn't answer any, and it most certainly didn't gain me a new friend. I wished more than anything I could know what was going on, what Mother was lying about or covering up, if anything. That dark blue bag with her clothes was just too strange, eerie even. There was just no doubt about it. There was something incredibly off here. I just knew it. When we got back to the safe haven of the cabin realm, I laid down in the yard for my daily morning nap, resting my head on the log. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fall asleep. I couldn't get all the new, nagging questions out of my head. I can tell you're not sleeping, Valzar said from somewhere high above me. I opened my eyes. Yes, I'm just... Thinking? Right. Valzar chuckled. Seems to be the big thing with you these days, eh? Or perhaps I should say the big flaw. I sat up straight, leaning my back against the log. I just don't get it, Valzar. I mean, I'm 11 years old now, for Alondra's sake. Sure, I'm still a little girl, but I'm not that little anymore. I mean, I feel like I should know, and should be able to know more about the world, don't you? And more people, too, of course. I mean, it seems Mother is hiding things from me, from us, or she's wrong about certain things, and it's just so... infuriating. Valzar swooped down and perched on my shoulder. Mara, calm down. I know some things have been a tad suspicious as of late, but you know Mother is just looking out for you. She wants what's best for you, for both of us, and all of Elandra for that matter, so please try to calm down. Why did he have to be so logical? Still, I couldn't fight that fishy, needling feeling weaving through my gut, becoming part of its cloth. As these thoughts brewed in my brain, Mother pushed between two trees with gold X's on them at the edge of the cabin realm, wearing her black cloak and carrying her gulak skin bag as usual. Had she just retrieved the cloak from the sack in the mire and put it on? I was absolutely dying to know. But one look at her deep scarlet face, her dragon-toothed sharp gaze threatening to impale both mine and Valzar's, I knew we were in big trouble. Like huge trouble, because I knew she knew we had been outside the cabin realm, or at least that I had. All my muscles grew tense, a large knot clenching hard in my stomach. Mother? Mara? Mother, please listen. I cannot believe you, young lady. I simply cannot believe it. She strode up to me and plopped her gulak skin bag to the ground. I just retrieved my cloak from my bag in the mire, and I saw that it was not carefully folded like how I left it. Oh, gulak crud. That was true. I had just sort of eased the cloak back into the bag. I'd completely forgotten it had been folded in the first place. She strapped her arms across her chest, still impaling me with her gaze. You deliberately disobeyed me yet again, and left the one place you're safe from the utterly horrific terrors of the outside world, the one place your beloved father created as to protect all of us and the entire future of Elandra due to your incredibly important magical destiny. Well, obviously Father hadn't built the cabin realm to protect Valzar, since he hadn't even been around then, but I wasn't about to make light of that. "Well, yes, Mother, but—" My mind reeled, struggling to find some kind of excuse or at least something to try to calm her down, but I couldn't latch onto a single thing.
"What an utterly wretched, selfish young lady you have become, Mara O'Shear Fulgrod. Utterly wretched and selfish. Why, your father would be deeply ashamed and disappointed were he here today. Not only are you once again banished straight to bed without lunch or dinner, but you are now forbidden to leave the cabin itself, forever, or, until you are of age."
"What?" I practically squawked like Falzar. "No, Mother, you can't."
"To your room, young lady, right this instant. I don't want to hear another word. This is what you have driven me to. Now go."
I stood from the log, Falzar still perched on my shoulder, and scurried into the cabin and up to the loft, my eyes stinging the whole way. I lay down on my cot, and Falzar nuzzled beside me under the cover before the tears came full force. It was bad enough I angered Mother to the point I wasn't even allowed to leave the cabin, but the most awful of all was how she said Father would be so ashamed and disappointed with me. I always thought he'd be so proud of me, especially when I finally defeated Lord Sycorath once and for all when I was 18. I mean, would Father really hate me for breaking the rules of the cabin realm? Would he really hate me for being curious because of some of the odd, conflicting things I saw and what Mother said about Alondra and my magical destiny? Would he really hate me for wishing I could leave the cabin realm to simply meet someone new and possibly make a friend? I mean, Falzar was great and all, but it was so horrifically lonely being confined in the cabin realm with just him all day, every day. Suddenly my tears dried up. No, Father wouldn't. I was absolutely certain of it. Despite all the terrifying things Mother just said, I couldn't help but still feel like something was off, like I was onto something. She refused to tell me the truth, whatever it was, and there was no denying that. She was hiding something big, maybe even a lot of somethings, and I swore to all the great and powerful wizards of Alondra to ever live that I was going to find out exactly what they were, and maybe even make a new friend along the way, just as soon as the sun shed itself on this cold, cruel world tomorrow morning. Chapter 8. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because when I awoke, Falzar was no longer lying beside me, and the bright mid-afternoon sun slanted through the tiny window above my mattress, spreading an orangey square across it. I climbed out of bed, headed downstairs. Mother must have been out hunting gulaks, as usual this time.
"Good afternoon, Mara."
Falzar didn't even bother to shift his attention away from where he was grooming himself on the middle of the kitchen table. "Good afternoon, Falzar." I headed toward the door.
"Wait, where do you think you're going, young lady?"
"Outside." As I expected, Falzar immediately took flight, flapping wildly right above me.
"Mara, please, don't you think you've caused more than enough grief at this point? You know you're not supposed to leave the cabin now."
"Yes, I'm well aware." I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Mother of all gulak crud." "Why?" I said. "Why, you must be kidding me."
"What is it?"
He hovered directly above me now.
"Did Mother lock the door?"
"Yes, she actually locked us inside."
"Well, serves us, or really I should say you, right."
But I stepped up to one of the windows beside the door, moved the curtain slightly to the side, and attempted to move the latch. It wouldn't budge either. Then I tried the window on the other side, as well as the one across the room beside the bookshelf. "Oh no," I murmured. "She did it. She really did it. There's absolutely no way for us to leave." Not that it was all that much of a difference from before when you really thought about it. We were always kind of trapped in this stupid, boring, lonely cabin realm in a way, and I was absolutely tired of it.
"Yes,"
Falzar said,
"and like I was saying, it serves us right."
I glanced rapidly around the room, my gaze landing on the fireplace, the iron cauldron nestled inside. I headed over and gripped the handles, which were cool to the touch.
"Mara, what in the history of Alondra are you doing?"
It took all my strength to lift the cauldron just enough off the floor so that I could move it over to the other side. Then I moved the 2 somewhat charred logs that had been beneath it and gazed up the chimney, craning my neck so I could see the bright blue sky all the way up. It wasn't that far, actually, and many of the bricks that formed the inside of the chimney jutted out a bit or had large gaps between them where I could place my hands and feet. So I did, gradually shimmying my way up the chimney. "Mara, seriously, what are you doing?" Falzar crowed from below. "Have you gone completely and utterly mad? Please come back down here right this very instant." "No, thank you, Falzar. I'm heading outside. But you can stay down there if you'd like. Forever, that is." Well, not forever, of course, but I wanted to tease him a bit, goad him into coming along. Although, I had to admit, a part of me wouldn't be surprised if we would really be stuck down there forever if we both stayed there. Falzar continued to shout as I climbed, but I ignored him, pain biting my hands more and more from gripping the rough stones. But I kept going, squeezing between tight, jagged spaces and trying to ignore the pesky soot gathering on my hands. Almost there. Finally, I crawled out onto the roof, which was made of logs like the rest of the cabin, and just sat there, rubbing the soot onto my cloak while waiting for the stinging to die down. As I did, Falzar emerged from the chimney, flying high in the sky. "Mara, please listen to reason. You're behaving incredibly foolishly right now. Come back down the chimney right this very instant." When the pain had completely subsided from my hands, I shimmied along the roof, which slanted downward at a slight angle. Thankfully, a stack of logs Mother had planned for the fireplace at some point rested just below the rooftop, so I gingerly lowered myself onto the pile, then hopped down into the yard. "Mara, this is getting out of hand." I strode towards the edge of the yard again. "Mara!" Falzar squawked louder than I'd ever heard him squawk as I entered the mire for the 3rd time in my life. Chapter 9. A second later, Falzar was flapping especially loudly above me again. Despite his constant shouts and flaps, I trekked out to the row of trees lining the path that wound through the mire. The dark blue cloth sack still leaned against the same tree as earlier today. I unzipped it. As I expected, the same black cloak with the Fulgrod family crest lay inside. It had to be Mother's, which meant she had to be out somewhere in the thick Alondra wearing only her underdress again, as utterly ridiculous as that sounded, unless something else was going on somehow. I shoved the cloak back inside and zipped the sack back up. "I don't know what you're looking for exactly, Mara, but I suggest we head back to the cabin now. For the love of everything that is sacred in Alondra, please listen to me just this once." Ha! As if I would allow myself to even entertain that thought. "Well," I said, "there's only one thing left to do now, isn't there?" Before he could answer, I pushed past the row of trees and began heading along the narrow dirt path to the right. Chapter 10. As I moved along the path, I kept an eye out for any living creatures or anything hazardous that might leap in our way, like a Shadrith or Lord Sikarath or something, if there even were such things. Falzar continued following as well, but for the first time he was eerily quiet. Must have finally given up on trying to convince me to stop and go back. After the path curved a couple times, it opened into a large, open area full of enormous structures. I stopped at the edge and I just stared at them. My, oh my. Many of the gigantic things stretched up into the air as high as Mother's and my cabin, if not higher, and they sported all different types of bright colors, as well as what appeared to be long, skinny objects and steps with railings leading up to platforms. A couple of the structures had long, narrow, curvy things that sloped from high up all the way down to the sandy ground. What in the world of Alondra were these things? But that wasn't all. There were children here, too. I counted a total of 4 of them, all shimmying along the long, skinny objects or climbing the steps or running along the platforms, smiling and shouting gleefully, like they were having fun. 2 looked to be about my age, and the other 2 a couple or so years younger. What were they doing here? And why? But perhaps most importantly, maybe these were the people I was looking for. Maybe if I spoke to them, they would like me and want to be my friend, and vice versa. But as soon as that thought occurred to me, I couldn't help but wonder if this was really some kind of dark magic at work, even if it looked like the children were having fun. Were these hulking structures really some kind of horrific, bewitched contraptions created by Lord Sikarath to entrap little children and keep them exhaustedly climbing and running around against their will forever? They had to be, right? All of Alondra was under Lord Sycorath's dark evil reign, after all, right? As these thoughts churned viciously through my mind, one of the younger children slid down one of the long, narrow, curvy things. "Whee!" she cried as she went. Well, she certainly seemed to be having fun, and a lot of it, too. And I had to admit it did look pretty fun. But before I could think much about it, I noticed something else. Only a few yards away, off to the side of the massive structures, sat a grown man and woman on some kind of extra-long chair, filling most of it up. And they were both looking at me, their eyes narrowed, foreheads crinkled. "Hello there, young lady," said the man. His face was a bit wrinkly, but he was thick and strong-looking, with a large black beard and a mustache peppered with silver. He didn't wear a cloak like Mother and me, but some kind of clothing I'd never seen before that was separated. One piece for his top half, and one for his bottom half, it looked like. "Where are your parents, honey?" His deep voice ran shivers down my spine. I mean, I knew men's voices were deep, but not that deep. Even Lord Sycorath's in my dreams was never that low. I flicked my gaze to the woman, who looked about his age too, with long, stringy gray hair. "Young lady?" the man asked. Well, I said. "Did you lose them, sweetie?" the woman asked. I instinctively took a step backwards. "Honey, don't be afraid," she said. "Yes," the man said. "We just want to make sure everything is okay. Did you lose your mother or father in the park? If you like, you can wait here with us until they find you." Us? There was something about that word that made the shivers bolt up and down my spine. And what did he mean by park? What was a park exactly? Some kind of evil, twisted Lord Sycorath creation? I continued to slowly step backwards. "Honey?" the woman said. The man climbed to his feet. "Richard!" the woman cried. "You'll scare her!" I shuffled another couple steps backwards as I pointed a quivering finger at them, trying to well up as much magic as I could from deep down inside me. "Freeze! Both of you! Stay right where you are!" Neither moved a muscle. Yes, it was working. "Honey," the woman said, "we just want to help you, that's all. You can trust us, sweetie, really." "Yes, you can trust us, honey." Ha, right. In fact, I bet they were both really Shadriths. Shadriths in disguise as a pair of nice-looking wizards or humans. Mother said they had the ability to shapeshift, after all. Gah, I was a complete and utter fool to come out here. I hardly knew anything about the outside world. How could I expect to meet someone new, someone I could trust and be friends with, when I was merely a clueless 11-year-old girl? Continuing to well up as much magic as I possibly could, I scrunched my eyes shut, pointed my finger at them again, and shouted, "Begone! Begone, you horrible, evil, shape-shifting monsters!" I whipped my eyes open again, but they were still there, their own gazes still plastered to me, the man's mouth hanging open a bit, the woman touching her slightly parted lips with slender fingers. "Honey," she said, "are you all right? I promise everything is going to be completely fine. You can wait for your parents with us right here if you'd like. It's really no trouble at all." No, it didn't work. The spell didn't work. "Sweetheart," the man said, "please, just stay with us for a couple of minutes. I'm sure your parents will turn up in no time." He took another step forward, but I whirled around and raced back along the path. I didn't even bother to shoot a glance behind me to see if the terrible Shadriths were following, perhaps even having morphed back into their incredibly tall, gangly black forms. The ferocious flapping wings above me told me Falzar was flying along with me too, undoubtedly as horrified as I was. After rounding a couple of the path's curves, I veered off into the forest near the dark blue sack, burst into the cabin realm, climbed onto the roof via the pile of logs, and shimmied down the chimney as fast as I could. After I landed in the fireplace, I raced to one of the windows by the door and peered out. Oh, thank the great and illustrious history of Alondra! The yard was completely empty. Not a single sign of the Shadriths or any of Lord Sycorath's other evil minions. Then again, it was impossible for them to ever enter the cabin realm in the first place. At least according to Mother. Still, the Shadriths clearly weren't able to catch me. They weren't even close to fast enough, the stupid, pitiful beings. I was way more magical than them. Ha! I threw back my head and let out a big, long laugh that came from the very pit of my belly. It just kept going and going, and it felt so great. "What's so funny?" Falzar asked when I finally stopped. He was perched on the table, stabbing me with the evilest eye I'd ever seen. "Your utter foolishness nearly got us killed, Mara. I mean, I've never been so fantastically terrified in all my natural-born life." I know, I'm sorry, Falzar. I never should have gone out there. There's a good chance those were Shadriths in disguise as nice wizards or humans. I'm glad we were able to get back here safe and sound." "Me as well, Mara. I prayed to the great creator of Elandra that such would happen, and it did. But we must never leave the cabin realm, or the cabin for that matter, ever again. Just like Mother said. Is that perfectly clear?" Yes, definitely." "Good. Now let's get everything back in order before Mother returns." "Right, of course." I swept my gaze over the cauldron and log still lying to the side of the fireplace, as well as the trail of mud my sneakers had tracked across the wooden floor. Oh, Gulak crud! I'd rushed back to the cabin so quickly, I hadn't been careful to step in highly weeded areas, so I didn't pick up any mud or leave any footprints. But no sooner did that thought enter my head than the lock clicked in the front door. No. Then the doorknob turned. No, it couldn't be. I whirled back around just in time for the door to swing open, slamming against the wall. Mother stood fully upright in the doorway, wearing her black cloak and holding her gulak skin bag as usual, sheer murder plastered across her deep scarlet face as she beheld both Falzar and me. Chapter 11. Gulak crud! I was busted. Completely and utterly busted. Mother dropped the gulak skin bag to the floor with a much louder thud than usual, keeping her frightening gaze on Falzar and me. "Wait, Mother, before you get upset. I know what I did was horribly, horribly wrong, and I will never, I swear, never do it again." "Mara!" "Yes, I broke out of the cabin. Yes, I went down that path out there in the mire, and yes, I bumped into a couple of Shadriths." "You what?" Her whole body jolted slightly backwards as if she'd been struck by something hefty, and she threw a hand to her chest, her breaths coming out more like wheezes. "I bumped into a couple of Shadriths. They were out there by this large, wide-open area where all these tall, massive structures are, and they took the forms of these really nice-looking wizards. Or maybe they were humans, and they tried to get me, Mother. They tried to get me. But I ran so fast, Mother. You'd have been so proud of me. And I escaped from them and got back here to the cabin realm, where I'm all safe and sound now. Forever. I'm never leaving, Mother. Never again, I promise, Mother. Cross my heart and hope to die." Mother's face slowly morphed from deep scarlet to sickly pale, her eyes losing focus and her shoulders quivering so much you would have thought she just stepped out into freezing cold weather. Oh, Gulak scat. What's wrong, Mother? I know what I did was wrong, and I know it was Shadriths out there. I didn't at first, but now I do. And now I know how dangerous it really is out there, and how important it is I never, ever leave the cabin realm. Ever. She picked up the gulak skin bag and headed over to the counter. "We need to leave. Now." "What?" I practically squawked again. "What do you mean, Mother?" "We need to go. All of us. We need to leave this place right this very moment." She dumped the gulak meat onto the counter, then began shoving utensils, books, and all sorts of things into the bag. "We can only take whatever we can carry." But why, Mother? Why do we have to go? What's going on?" I glanced at Falzar, who was still perched on the table, but he only shrugged, his eyes wider than I'd ever seen them, his tiny body trembling as much as Mother's shoulders. Mother didn't reply as she continued to shove whatever would fit into the bag. "Mother, please tell me. I thought we were safe here forever, or at least until I finally defeated Lord Sikarath." She froze in the middle of jamming another hardcover book into the bag, which was nearly bulging now. "Well, we're not, honey. I mean, we were, but, well, now..." She paused, chewing on her bottom lip, her eyes glazing over again. I don't understand, Mother. She shook her head hard.
No, Mara, I'm the one who doesn't understand. How could you do something so utterly and despicably foolish as to leave the cabin realm? Twice! I told you it was dangerous. I told you so many times, but you refused to listen. And now we have to flee our beloved home and venture out into the treacherous world of Elandra and find a new place to live. One without any magical protection. Why? Why would you do this to us?
But I couldn't focus on my answer, because that annoying, prickly feeling was back, needling through every fiber of my being. The incredibly strong one that told me Mother was still not telling me the whole truth, or was hiding something important. She kept dodging my questions or immediately shifted blame to me whenever I asked. Gah! Why wouldn't she just tell me the truth? I shot Falzar a hopeless glance, wishing he could help the situation in some way, but of course he couldn't. Instead, he just shrugged meekly. Mother followed my gaze to him with hers and stopped stuffing things into the bag.
Oh, that's it, isn't it? It's that dragon. That stupid, God-forsaken dragon's telling you to do all these immensely foolish, dangerous things, isn't he?
Huh? What? I sputtered. And what the gulag crud did God-forsaken mean? She popped over to the cabinet containing the lock, quickly removed it by shifting something on it with her fingers, and pulled out the magical weapon. Then she pointed the long skinny part with the hole at the end at Falzar. No, Mother! What are you doing? I cried. Now it was Falzar's face's turn to morph from bright red to an ashen color, his entire tiny body going from trembling to totally still.
Say goodbye to Falzar, Mother said.
No, I screamed. Mother, stop!
Say goodbye.
No, Mother, please, put down the weapon.
This is your last chance, Mara. Say it.
No! She narrowed her gaze at Falzar. Falzar, fly! I shouted. Fly away now! He shifted his gaze to me, a blurry complexion taking it over. Falzar, come on, please. You have to fly away, right this very instant. But all he did was slowly shake his head. What? Why not? Please just do it.
I can't, Mara, he murmured.
What? How come?
I'm sorry, Mara. I'm so sorry. But I can't.
Huh? Why?
Goodbye, Mara, he said. I love you.
No! No!
Fine, Mother said. I'll say goodbye then. Goodbye, Falzar.
Falzar scrunched his eyes shut as Mother's long, spindly fingers started to pull back the little curvy thing on the weapon. I let out the loudest scream I possibly could. Chapter 12. But before Mother activated the weapon, a loud knock sounded on the front door, barely audible amid my scream. Mother uttered under her breath what sounded like some kind of swear word I've never heard before as she slowly lowered the weapon. Oh, thank the great creator of Elandra Falzar was safe. For now, anyway.
Mara, go to one of the windows and see who's at the door, please.
I couldn't help but notice the quiver to Mother's voice. Gulak crud, this was bad. This was incredibly bad. Sure, Mother. I flared my eyes at Falzar, trying to hint at him to fly away again, especially since Mother was currently distracted, but he just shook his head and looked down at the table. Seriously, what was wrong with him? Was he so loyal to Mother, believed everything she said, that he was willing to die at her command? Did he just think that must be best for him if Mother thought so? Maybe he was, and did, and maybe he was right. I headed over to one of the windows, moved the curtain slightly to the side, and peeked out. There are 2 wizards, or maybe humans out there, or at least it looks like it. 1 man and 1 woman.
What are they wearing?
They both have dark blue clothes and hats on, and also some kind of gold emblem on their chests. The woman knocked on the door.
Police!
She called. Police? What in the illustrious history of the Balite elven race did that mean? Mother let out that strange curse word again.
It's as bad as I thought it might be. Okay, Mara, this is what we're going to do. On the count of 3, I want you to yank the door open as hard as you can and stand completely out of the way of the doorway. Can you do that for me?
I nodded, placing my hand on the doorknob, my heart slamming so hard against my ribcage it seemed influenced by powerful magic. Despite the extremely nerve-wracking situation, though, I couldn't help but wonder who these odd, human-like creatures were standing right outside the cabin. More Shadriths in disguise? Or something else entirely? And how could they even be in the cabin realm? Perhaps more of Mother's lies? Gah, I swear to the great creator of Alandra. Mother pointed the magical weapon, which shook in her grasp at the door. Rivulets of sweat dribbled down her cheek and forehead, matting strands of her long black hair to them.
Okay, honey. Here we go. On the count of 3. 1.
Mara, don't do it! Balzar cried.
2.
Mara! Balzar cried. I believe you now. I think you were right all along. Mother's been constantly lying to you, to us, all along. And something's off right now. Horribly, horribly off. I had to admit, I couldn't help but agree with him there.
3.
Don't do it! Balzar cried again. I stayed totally still, my hand still on the doorknob.
Mara,
Mother said.
I told you to open the door, sweetie. Why didn't you?
The weapon was still trembling in her grasp, even more than before, sweat literally dripping off her face onto the wooden floor.
Good,
Balzar said.
Don't listen to her, Mara. Whatever you do, don't listen to her.
Mother followed my gaze to Balzar again and let out a blood-curdling screech. She aimed the magical weapon at him again, just as the door flew open and the 2 human-like creatures burst into the cabin. Chapter 13. I instinctively jerked out of the way of the door as the 2 figures whipped past me. Mother wrenched the magical weapon toward the figures, and that horrible deafening sound rang out, echoing in the room. Mother dropped the magical weapon to the floor with a loud thud as she bent over, clutching her stomach with both hands.
I'm sorry, Mara. I'm so sorry.
The 2 human-like creatures raced up to her, each pointing some kind of small black thing at her. She slumped uselessly against one of them, who grabbed her with both arms. What did they do to her? Holy Mother of Gulak Crud, what did they do to her? It's over now, the woman creature said. It's all over. She was right. They had Mother firmly in their grasp now, and there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't go against 2 Shadriths in disguise or whatever they were. I let out a high-pitched scream as I whirled around and raced out the door. Wait, stop, kid! The man's deep, guttural voice yelled as I blazed across the front yard toward the edge of the cabin realm. Yes, please stop, the woman cried. I burst into the mire and kept running. I had to. Mother would have wanted me to save myself. I knew that for certain. She would have wanted me to run off and hide and try to survive out in the wild of Alandra somewhere without her, until I was finally old enough to defeat Lord Sikarath once and for all. Oh, Mother, what have I done? How could I have done this to you and to us? Great Creator of Alandra, please tell me she's going to be okay. Please tell me she'll somehow survive this horrible Shadrith or whatever it is attack and meet up with me sometime in the very near future. And Balzar, too. Please tell me he flew away and is somewhere safe now. But deep down, I knew the situation looked horribly bleak. If those creatures in the cabin were indeed Shadriths or a couple of other type of Lord Sikarath's minions, they'd kill them both. There was absolutely no doubt about it, and I only had myself to blame. Hot tears ran down my cheeks, dripping into the sludge and weeds as I ran. This was all my fault. Not only had I probably just killed the 2 people I loved most in this world, I put the whole world of Alandra itself in grave jeopardy. After all, the Shadriths would undoubtedly confiscate the magical weapon and probably even destroy it, so there was no chance I could ever recover it and use it against Lord Sycorath. Oh, all the great and powerful wizards of Elandra. I ruined everything. I killed everyone. Come on, Mara. Don't think of it that way. Maybe you can at least still destroy Lord Sycorath when you're 18. You just need to get away from the Shadriths right now. The tears kept coming as I burst onto the narrow trail and veered left this time. Better to run in the opposite direction of that large, open area with all the hulking structures where the other 2 Shadriths in disguise had been. Now that I thought about it, maybe the Shadriths in the cabin were actually the same ones as before, just in different disguises this time. Not that it mattered, I guess. I risked a glance behind me, but no one was following me. Thank the great creator of Elandra. As I did, though, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. To the right of the trail, behind a couple of rows of trees, a giant figure rushed by, parallel to the path. It came from the opposite direction I was running, and was mostly black and white, with a pair of bright red and blue objects on its head that kept flashing. The figure kept making a loud noise, too, some kind of strange warbling sound that reverberated throughout the area. It passed me within a couple of seconds, vanishing off in the near distance. What in the illustrious history of Elandra had that been? Some other kind of horrid creature Lord Sycorath created? Or maybe even a Shadrith that had magically taken a much larger and more terrifying form? Whatever it was, I was incredibly thankful it was gone. However, a moment later, another one of the magnificent beasts rushed past just like the first, also flashing its small red and blue things and making that loud warbling noise. I rounded another curve and froze. Oh, mother of Gulak-Scat. A couple more Shadriths wearing dark blue clothes were running toward me a bit further down the trail. "Stop!" one of them called. Sounded like a woman's voice. Wow, they were really good at disguising. "Stay right there, sweetie." Ha, as if. I whirled back around and froze again. A couple more dark blue Shadriths were running toward me from the direction I just came from, too. Oh, sweet creator of Elandra, I was trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. Chapter 14. There was only one thing left to do. I split off into the woods on the side of the trail, my feet sinking back into soft marshland as I tore through patches of weeds and scraggly brush and weaved around trees. Distant voices cried for me to stop and come back, but I didn't pay them any heed. It was much tougher running through the swamp and woods than along the trail, though, and the Shadriths were much better at it than I was. Probably because they were so much bigger and stronger than me. Before I knew it, they were catching up, their footsteps making loud, wet smacks just a few yards or so behind me.
"Stop, little girl, please!" one of them cried again. "We're just trying to help you."
"That's right," yelled another. "We mean no harm. Please just stop, honey." Right. I bet Lord Sycorath would just love that. I kept pumping forward, my whole body on fire. My legs threatening to give out any second, but I wouldn't let them. I couldn't. I had to survive. For Mother and Falzar, for all of Elandra. But the Shadriths kept gaining. A moment later, it sounded like they were only a couple feet behind me. Suddenly, I burst into an open, grassy clearing, an enormous slab of black rock directly in front of me on the far side. The rock reached at least 50 feet high and spanned the entire width of the clearing. And then I saw it. A narrow gap in the middle of the rock. So narrow there was no way the creatures could catch me if I made it inside. If I could just get there. I kept running at full speed, as hard as I possibly could. I even tried to will any magic I might have had to help me. And luckily, it paid off, because I made it to the fissure and squeezed inside before any of the Shadriths could get me. I kept going, though much slower now, since all I could do was slide along sideways, both my sides brushing against the slick rock walls. Besides, the Shadriths couldn't get me in here. I was home free.
"Get out of there, young lady, right now!"
"Get out of there, little girl!" I let out a giggle as I kept sliding along, deeper and deeper into the fissure. A nice, loud, long giggle. I couldn't help myself. "Take that, you filthy, good-for-nothing Shadriths!" I yelled back at where the despicable creatures crowded the opening. "You'll never get me. Never. As I am the great and powerful Mara O'Shear Fulgrod, daughter of the most powerful good wizards to ever live. And I swear to you, right here, right now, that I will demolish you all some day. Every last one of you, and that includes Lord Sycorath himself, and peace will finally reign supreme once again in all of Elandra. The creatures shot each other wide-eyed looks, their foreheads etched in crinkles. Shadriths? One of them crawled. What in the world are Shadriths, honey?
And who's Lord Sycorath? And Elandra, for that matter?
Ha! I knew for certain they were Shadriths, trying to play dumb like the pathetic little evil beings they were, trying to make me think that they weren't what I suspected to be all along. Then a Shadrith that looked like a woman stepped up to the gap. "Honey!" she yelled. She and the other Shadriths had to be a good 40 feet away from me now. "You have to stop going deeper into that fissure. It's dangerous. There's no way of knowing what's in there, and—" My back foot slipped, forcing me into an awkward sideways crouch, and I glanced toward the back of the fissure. A gaping black hole where my foot slipped gazed back at me, a couple of pebbles sliding down into the abyss, which stretched as wide and deep as I could see. "Oh, Gulak crud!" "Honey!" the woman yelled, her voice sounding distant now. "Please come back! You have to! It could be extremely dangerous! Please come back right now before something terrible happens!" I looked back at her. She appeared so far away, like she was in another magical realm, and she might as well have been as far as I was concerned. I glanced up. A clear blue sky, like nearly always, hovered above the sheer, 50-foot rock walls on either side of me, the only soothing thing around me. Finally, I looked back at the enormous dark hole in the ground. Once again, there was only one thing left to do. I scrunched my eyes shut. Hopefully I wouldn't plummet to my death like in that horrible nightmare I had with Lord Sycorath. In fact, hopefully I could use my magic again to help me survive, make me float down safely or something if it happened to be an incredibly long fall. Yes, I could do that. That's what I'll do. I opened my eyes, trained them back on the hole, and bit my bottom lip so hard it hurt. All right, Mara, here goes. Chapter 15. I was about to make the jump when an all-too-familiar voice cried, "Mara, stop!" I whipped my gaze back toward the clearing. "Falzar!" I cried. I couldn't believe it. I really, truly couldn't believe it. There he was, just sitting there, perched on one of the Shadrith's shoulders as if he didn't have a worry in the world. But how was that possible? And why? On closer look, it appeared as though it was on the shoulders of one of the Shadriths who'd been in the cabin a couple of minutes ago.
"Yes, that's right," the tall, strong-looking man said. "Look who's decided to come and join us, little girl. See? He's totally fine with us. Isn't that right, Falzar?"
"Yes, absolutely," Falzar said. "You see, Mara, these are actually really nice people who don't mean you or me or Mother any harm. Not in the slightest bit. And they're not Shadriths or some other kind of dangerous creature like we thought they might be. They're just normal people who want to help us. And not only that, they want to be our friends, Mara. Yours, Mother's, and my friends."
I let that drop into the pit of my brain, swirl around a bit. "Are you absolutely sure?"
"Totally. 100%.
"How do you know?"
"Why, they would have killed both me and Mother already if they were. But we're both still alive and completely fine."
"What? Mother's alive?" It felt as if my very soul leaped back into my body, and I hadn't even known it had left. "Mother's alive! She's alive!" The words ran through my head non-stop. I'd never been so happy in my entire life. Falzar nodded feverishly.
"That's right," said the man whose shoulder
Falzar was perched on. A huge smile hung on his face.
"She's, a little injured at the moment because of our, unexpected encounter with her, but we're taking extremely good care of her, and she's going to be completely okay, all right? I promise."
"Yep," said another one of the dark blue-wearing people, a woman. "You, she, and Falzar are all going to be completely fine, honey, we promise."
"They're telling the truth, Mara," Falzar said.
But, I said, but why did Mother try to attack them with the magical weapon? And why did they attack her? We attacked her out of self-defense, the woman said, because she was trying to attack us. And we're not really sure why she was exactly, the man said. But you and your mother are not supposed to be living out here in the middle of a public park. Public park? I asked. There was that word park again, whatever it meant. That's right, a man said. It's illegal. Illegal? I must have seemed completely confused, because the man and woman exchanged glances. Same with the other people crowded by the opening. Honey, the woman said, we're afraid your mother might not be completely right in the head. What do you mean? I asked. As in, the man said, it appears her mind is currently not well. Like it has a kind of like it has a disease. And this disease may be making her say and behave in very strange ways. Maybe even has been for a very long time now. I let that sink in, still poised in sort of a half-crouch which was starting to make my ankles burn, so I straightened my posture. It makes sense, Mara, Falzar said. It would explain all the odd things that have been going on with Mother lately. Maybe even ever since you were born. All the lying, all the inconsistencies, the fact that she refuses to tell you the truth about anything and gets incredibly angry. She's sick, Mara. Very, very sick. In the mind. Oh, I said. I see. So this disease, is it some kind of magical one? Did Lord Sikarath make her mind terribly sick with some kind of awful, evil spell or something? All the people wearing dark blue clothes exchanged looks again. No, sweetie, the woman said. It has nothing to do with magic. It's just a regular illness. That's right, said another man behind the one with Falzar on his shoulder. He looked a bit like a short, frumpy pear. So, come on out now, honey. It's totally safe, we promise. And like we said, your mother will be totally fine, too. She just, well, needs to be healed both physically and mentally, which we're doing for her right this very moment. Yes, Mara, Falzar said. It's completely safe. Please come out of there now. Okay, I'm coming. Excellent, cried one of the people, and a couple others clapped and cheered loudly. I began slowly sliding my way along the narrow fissure, heading back toward the clearing. Finally, I slipped out, and all the people, a total of 6, formed a circle around me. Falzar immediately flew off the man's shoulder and landed on mine. I'm so proud of you, Mara, he squawked. But as soon as he said that, I grabbed him and gave him the biggest hug I'd ever given anyone in my entire life. Oh, Falzar, I thought I'd lost you forever, both you and Mother. We thought we lost you too, Mara. When I stopped hugging him, I kept him cradled in my arms. Good job, sweetheart, said the woman as she stooped so she was eye level with me. She was quite pretty, with long blonde hair and sparkling green eyes. You're a very brave little girl, you know that? You certainly are, said the man who'd had Falzar perched on his shoulder. Oh, thank you, I said. And so is your little dragon friend, he winked at Falzar. Thank you, sir. Falzar stuck his nose up in the air, then laughed and lowered it. Come on now, said the pear-shaped man. Follow us, honey. We need to bring you to an even safer place where we can explain some things to you. A lot of things, probably. Okay, good. That was definitely what I needed right about now. All along, really. A little, perhaps even a lot, of explaining. Epilogue. The Volvo turned into a suburban house development with a giant sign out front proclaiming Beach Sunflower Villa in huge script font, and I clutched Falzar close to my chest in the passenger seat. I couldn't believe this day had come at last. What was I going to say to Mother? What would she say to me? What would she even look like now? It was hard to imagine any of that, really, but the questions made my heart hammer relentlessly against my rib cage. Adrenaline churned through every one of my veins. After all, I had been waiting for this day for 7 whole years, Ever since the police discovered Mother and me living in the middle of the woods at Jackson Park in the small town of Jackson, Florida. I was officially 18 now, the same age I'd supposedly been destined to defeat the great dark wizard Lord Sycorath once and for all in the vast magical world of Elandra. In a way, that was all kind of ironic. After all, after Mother and I had been apprehended by the police, I learned that just about everything she ever told me was complete and utter nonsense, as I had actually been beginning to suspect when I was 11. As it turned out, she'd basically made it all up, including every last detail about Elandra, and made me believe it as well. I let out a sigh as the Volvo slowly rolled along Beach Sunflower Villa's main, smoothly paved road, heading toward Mother's new home. Mostly white, identical two-story houses lined both sides of the street, nearly every yard full of bushes brimming with bright yellow beach sunflowers. I mean, when you really thought about it, the whole thing was nothing short of bizarre. Apparently Mother wasn't actually even my real mother. The police told me at the police station after holding me there overnight that both my real parents had had a bit too much to drink one night when I was only 1 year old, crashed their car into an electric pole, and immediately died. Although I hadn't known what alcohol, an electric pole, a car, or even a police station were at the time, of course. As so it happened, Mother, a fairly mentally ill woman even back then, witnessed the crash and plucked me, totally unharmed, from the back seat before anyone else could arrive on the scene. A lover of fantasy books, she then kept me hidden from the rest of the world in a small cabin in the park, deluding me with completely made-up tales of Elandra and my so-called magical destiny. Then, after she and I were finally apprehended by the police, she went to jail for what she'd done, where she also received a ton of psychotherapy. However, thankfully, my foster parents of the past 7 years and I just found out that she'd finally been released and had her own home in a nice neighborhood here in southern Florida. Apparently, she was mentally healthy enough to see me again if I was willing. And of course I was. Even though she pulled a shroud over my head for the first 11 years of my life, including keeping me away from other people, she'd still been my mother, and I still loved her. I hugged Falzar even tighter in the passenger seat, just thinking about that as the Volvo rounded a curve. The street still lined with identical houses, looked like the whole complex was. Hugging Falzar also gave me comfort about what was sure to be somewhat of a nerve-wracking interaction. It really had been so long since I had last seen dear old Mother, but I wanted to see her so badly, as she was truly a good woman on the inside. I just knew it. I almost laughed out loud as I hugged Falzar, though, because it was hard to believe I had ever thought he'd been a real, live baby dragon instead of just a stuffed animal. He'd become quite real to me in my sheltered loneliness, the friend I desperately needed all those years, in a way, even though his personality had really just been part of my subconscious the entire time, his bouts of flying cooked up by my imagination. I had to go through quite a bit of therapy myself to unentwine my mind from the outlandish aspects of those 11 years living in the so-called cabin realm, but all in all, I was much better for it. I had healed pretty much completely and was ready to see Mother again. "Are you okay, honey?" Mom asked from the driver's seat, shattering my reflection on what now felt like had to have been a whole different life, a whole lifetime ago. I guessed in a way it had been. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks." Mom was my foster mom. Once Mother was arrested, she'd been deemed too mentally unstable to be a parent, so I'd had to enter foster care, and an awesome young couple wound up picking me up. Mom was incredibly nice, and pretty too, with long brown hair and glistening hazel eyes. Dad was an awfully nice and handsome man himself as well, and would have been here right now too, but he had to be at work this evening. Mom angled her gaze down at where I hugged Falzar extra tightly, but didn't say anything. Finally she pulled the Volvo into the driveway of one of the endless identical houses, cut the engine, and got out of the car. I took a deep breath, gave Falzar one last huge squeeze, and left the car too, leaving him on the passenger seat. Mom and I walked side by side along the narrow stone path that led to the front door. We climbed the short front stoop, and I rang the doorbell, my heart threatening to clamber up my lungs. What would Mother be like now? What would she say and think of me and my new mom? Sure, she probably changed a lot due to the therapy and her time in jail. but I wondered if parts of the same old mother I knew and loved would still be there. I certainly hoped so. Footsteps came from inside, and the front door opened. At first, I didn't recognize the woman who stood before Mom and me. She was tall and skinny like how I remembered Mother, but her hair was a striking blonde, not black. But then I recognized her face. Then it hit me. She must have dyed her hair all those years to match mine, to sell the illusion I was her real daughter. Or maybe she did so recently to signify her new, healthier start in life after prison. "Hello, Mara," she said. "Hello, Mother," I said. And before I knew it, we were hugging. I wasn't even sure which one of us instigated or if we both did at the same time. When I pulled back, her eyes were glassy. "It's been a long time, Mara. A very long time. You look fantastic." "Thank you," I said. "You too." Mom introduced herself and Mother invited us inside. It was a nice little home, and it turned out Mother only lived on the first floor. The second one was another apartment. Still, it was much larger and different than the cabin I'd lived in with her for all those years. Very white and modern looking, with not a single piece of wood or torch sconce in sight, just regular electric ceiling lights. And the living room she led us to had a plush white sofa and an electric fireplace rather than an old-fashioned one with a cauldron. All good signs. Once Mom and I sat on the sofa, she asked us if we would like anything to drink, but we declined. She snagged a little white teacup from the kitchen for herself, though, and sat on the white leather chair across from us. "So," she said as she stirred her tea with a little stir, "I must officially apologize for everything that happened. You know, for everything I did to you over all those years. I only did it because I was mentally ill and didn't know any better, as I'm sure you're well aware. But if there's one thing I can say with absolute certainty, I truly loved you, and still do." Her eyes grew misty again as she gazed down at the clear glass table between the sofa and chair. "I love you too, Mother. And that's all right. I know you weren't entirely right in the head at the time. I forgive you." She looked back up from the table. "That's so fantastic to hear. Thank you so much, honey. Anyway, if you're wondering why I kind of developed some mental health issues, well, you see, shortly after I turned 18, I lost both my parents in a tragic car accident, just like you did." "Oh," I said. "I'm so sorry, Mother." "Me too." Mother slightly adjusted her posture on the couch. "Thank you," Mother said. "I'm sorry that happened to you as well, Mara. Anyway, aside from my long-time boyfriend at the time, they were the closest people to me by far." Her eyes became even blearier, but she kept them trained on me. "I literally did everything with them, and they were always there for me. Also, well, I didn't have many friends aside from my boyfriend. Many of the characters in the fantasy books I was constantly reading became my friends in a way." Oh, Mother, not that I couldn't relate. Being stuck in that cabin all day for all those years made the characters in Mother's books and stories very real to me as well. And then there was Falzar, of course. "In any case," she said, "just a year or so after I lost my parents, I also lost my boyfriend." The shadows around her eyes deepened even more, and she slightly adjusted her position in her chair. "Oh, Mother, he was really great too. Really faithful, and so fun to be around. And we had so many plans for the future. In fact, one of them was him becoming a cop one day. But he was tragically killed in a random drugstore robbery." "Oh no," I murmured. "That's terrible," Mom said. "Seriously, so many awful things around the same time. No wonder Mother became such a mess." Mother nodded, still idly stirring her tea. "Evidently, I never truly recovered from all that. I had plans to go to college, the same one my boyfriend was going to go to, but never followed through. Instead, I dropped out of high school and started working as an ice cream truck vendor to make ends meet since I didn't have any other friends or family to count on. This I had known about. The police told me shortly after they'd apprehended Mother and me that was what she'd been doing every day when she claimed she'd been out hunting gulags, and the so-called gulag meat she brought home was really just raw chicken from the local grocery store. It explained why she left her black witch cloak in that dark blue sack by the park trail. Every time she left or returned to the cabin, she swapped out her cloak for her ice cream vendor uniform, or vice versa. This was all before I found you in the back seat of your parents' crashed car, of course. I think, in a way, I thought finding you was life's way of telling me I could keep you as my own. You know, since I lost both my parents and you lost both of yours, like we were meant for each other or something. Of course, in reality, that was utterly ridiculous and not right of me, but, well, anyway, now that I'm out of jail and much better, I've been able to work my way up in that ice cream vendor company, and now manage a whole line of trucks here in southern Florida. Oh, wow, I said. That's fantastic, Mother. Yes, Mom said. That's great to hear. Congratulations. Mother's smile stretched from ear to ear. Thank you. And also, thank you so much for agreeing to come and meet me, Mara. I know I'm not your mother anymore, but I would love it if we could catch up every once in a while. You know, read a fantasy novel together here and there, perhaps even have some gulag stew for lunch or dinner. She smiled again as she winked at me. Or you know, some cream of chicken soup, really. I laughed. Sounds great, Mother. I'd love to. I think that's a wonderful idea as well, Mom said. Mother beamed and finally took a sip of her tea. Excellent. In that case, why don't we kick it all off with a little cream of chicken soup tonight? I've actually prepared some just for this occasion. Mom and I both agreed, and we all ate together in Mother's new kitchen, where we caught up on a lot of other things that had transpired over the last 7 years. Then Mother and I hugged again before Mom and I left the apartment. Goodbye, Mara, Mother called. See you soon. Say hi to your father for me. Oh, and Falzar too, if you still have him. I chuckled. I sure do, and I will. Bye, Mother. Mom said goodbye too, and we piled back into her Volvo. I waved as we left, Mother waving back from behind her apartment's front door screen, and Mom honked the horn. So, Falzar said as we pulled out of Beach Sunflower Villa. He was perched in my lap again. How'd it go? Oh, fantastically, I said. Really quite well. I can't wait to see her again. Oh, and next time, you should come too. Excellent, he said. I'm so glad to hear, and I would absolutely love to. Mom frowned at me. Who are you talking to, honey? Oh, no one, I said.